In wrestling, there are a number of superstars who come in looking like they can and will steal the show. However, wrestling is a sport of moments. One bad move and your entire career can end prematurely without you living up to the obvious potential that you had. Be it injuries, drugs, bad booking by the promotion, or simply bad life choices, there is no limit to the things that can bring a halt to an otherwise starry career. In this list, we will talk about those who look like they will never wrestle again without serious risk of harming themselves, and their legacy may forever remain a little emptier and incomplete. The rated R superstar Edge was one of the wrestlers who took it upon himself to pioneer tag team matches by taking things to another level, a level that seems to have not even been reached since then. When he teamed up with Christian to take on the likes of the Hardy Boys and the Dudley Boys in extreme tag team matches, anyone will testify that all 6 men took extreme risks and really sacrificed their bodies to put on the best possible show. Their 2 triple threat TLC tag team matches set a bar that hasn't been reached to this day. And of course, in the moments we're talking about these triple threat TLC tag team matches, you can't forget the moment that Edge speared Jeff Hardy, who was dangling in midair holding onto the titles from another ladder. They both fell 20 feet to the ground but somehow were able to escape injuries. It would be a ladder match, however, that caused the injury that would go on to end Edge's career. As during this ladder match with Eddie Guerrero on SmackDown, Edge fell and hurt a crack in his neck. He would complete the match, but that would be the injury that brought his career to a hasty end. He would go on to wrestle for many more years, winning titles, but he ended up having to retire early. In a speech that is one of the saddest in wrestling history, he announced that his injuries were such that he might die or be paralyzed if one move went badly. With that in mind, he retired at age 37. He had many more years of wrestling ahead of him, which seemed to have been stolen because of this injury. The only wrestler on this list whose comeback seems to be even remotely possible is Daniel Bryan, who is a star whose best years seem to have been robbed from him by injury as well. His high-flying style was simply too much for his body to take, and he did not really get to live up to even a quarter of the obvious potential that he had. Coming into WWE as possibly one of the most beloved indie darlings, Bryan Danielson, better known by his WWE name Daniel Bryan, did not immediately make a mark on the proceedings. To many fans who knew him, they loved him, but to the majority he was still a non-entity, a wrestler with a scrawny body who would never amount to much. They should have known better. Daniel Bryan may not be the strongest or largest, but there is no doubting his unmitigated charisma. His time as a heel world champion and later as a part of Team Hell No, this all gave rise to something that maybe no one in WWE could have predicted. At the time, Daniel Bryan was the people's champion. Sorry, Rock. The only problem? He was hardly ever champ. WWE is not a company that's exactly known for their faith in slimmer superstars. They tend to go for muscled monsters, and while some work out well, like Braun Strowman, the others are just experiments that went away, such as Heidenreich. Daniel's injury put him on the shelf sooner than anyone in WWE had realized. Just as he had broken through the glass ceiling and it looked like WWE was set to push him, sure, he had great WrestleMania moments, but very soon after he had to give a teary retirement speech, and it just didn't feel like his career should be over at the age of 34. Since then he has become the SmackDown Live GM, and it looks like he may have an in-ring return after all, but the WWE doctors are adamant that he will never be medically cleared to wrestle again. Either way, let's hope the choices that are made are good for Daniel's career and, more importantly, his life. Diamond Dallas Page came into the wrestling scene at a time that many would consider late in their life. Most wrestlers start rather early, but such was not the case for DDP, starting wrestling at the age of 31, and he did not let his age deter him. After 3 years in other independent promotions, by 91, DDP was signed to WCW, where he would slowly but surely make an impact to the likes that fans were never going to expect. Immensely charismatic, he did not really let age ever become an issue, as he put aside the thoughts of his relative inexperience to wrestle some of the best competitors in the world. He would soon become the World TV Champion and have an epic feud with Macho Man Randy Savage. But he didn't stop there. Never really known as a top wrestler, he was still loved by the fans and made his mark in WCW history. His matches against Bret Hart, Karl Malone, Randy Savage, and the fatal 4-way match he had against Ric Flair, Sting, and Hulk Hogan are particularly memorable. This all came to an end when WWE bought WCW. They did not really put over any WCW talent, and poor DDP was just another victim. Put into a dead-end feud as a heel stalker with The Undertaker, he never had a chance. One of the most beloved babyfaces had turned into someone who was just stalking Undertaker's wife. Undertaker wiped the floor with him, of course, and DDP would never really recover from the angle. He faded slowly but surely away from television and was never really a big factor on the WWE TV scene before his retirement, robbing him of all the obvious potential that he had. When it comes to talking about wrestlers who had potential, it's impossible to leave out Corey Graves. Now one of the best heel commentators in the company, Graves was supposed to have a huge career in the ring as well. He was in NXT during the time of Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, Dean Ambrose, and Bray Wyatt, but while all the rest went on to achieve success, from this perspective the cards didn't really play in his favor. Graves had amazing matches with Rollins and Neville, but he also suffered a number of concussions. He would return to TV on the pre-show panel and announce his retirement due to concussion issues. And though this was heartbreaking for him, he never really showed it. He went on to become possibly the best modern commentator in WWE, and works on both Raw and SmackDown at the moment. This may be his only consolation when he thinks about all that he could have achieved in the ring, but he was never able to. One of the most talented youngsters back in the day, Tyson Kidd never really had a push in WWE. His only success came in tag team action when he teamed up as the Hart Dynasty. He was able to become tag team champion, but whenever he was left without a partner, all he was left with was a singles run where he was not very successful. Finally, it looked as though him teaming up with Cesaro was going to put him back on track, as Kidd had a lot of chemistry with the Swiss Superman. He was just about to get the push that he had been waiting for when tragedy struck. In a dark match on Raw, he went against Samoa Joe. He would never wrestle again after this match. He was hit with a muscle buster, Joe's then finishing move. Things took such a turn for the worse that he suffered a severe spinal injury, an injury so serious that it is said only 5% survive it. After multiple surgeries, he was able to come out of it, but he could not wrestle again, and retired to a producing capacity behind the scenes. Raven isn't really a wrestler that is remembered when it comes to his wrestling role in WWE, or really anywhere outside ECW. He was actually a main event level talent and had the charisma to pull off the role easily and convincingly. Those who don't know about him outside his time in WCW and WWE should take a look at what he was doing in ECW and the groundbreaking feud he had with Tommy Dreamer during his time there. Compared to his ECW stuff, his run in WWE was really just disappointing. His time in TNA saw a bit of old Raven after he left WWE, but it was still not half as good as he was capable of pulling off in ECW. He never lived up to the potential that he had, and now at 53 is unlikely to ever wrestle again. A wrestler who was completely ruined by lifestyle choice. At one point it looked like Jake the Snake Roberts might die in relative obscurity. He was far ahead of his time and was one of the chief innovators in terms of wrestling psychology and promos. He made the DDT look like a lethal weapon, and very few wrestlers have had the attitude he brought. He had very few titles, and his time with the company came to an end way too soon. His history of substance abuse caught up with him, and his health deteriorated as he was busy with his personal demons, and if not for DDP, he might not be here today. DDP, with his patented DDP yoga, saw that Jake would return back to a healthier condition, and now at 62, he looks better than he did 10 years ago. Damien Sandow was sadly underutilized in WWE. His gimmick as the imparter of wisdom was not really quick to catch hold of the fans, and he became the first Money in the Bank winner to cash in and lose. Relegated to the bottom of the roster, he found a new gimmick. He began to mimic other legendary stars, and this soon caught on. He was one of the funniest acts in WWE, but it was his mimicry of The Miz that won the hearts of the fans. Miz's irritation at his stunt double being more popular than him was hilarious to watch, and they always got a reaction from the crowd. However, Sandow would never get the push that would gain him credibility as a single star, and WWE did not follow through on his gimmick, and he was soon released by the company without having lived up to the potential he had. Paige's retirement from wrestling is one of the saddest moments of all time. Paige came into wrestling as a woman who made change to the Divas division. She was the face of the women's revolution that WWE wanted. The problem lay elsewhere. She had health issues from the beginning of her life, with abnormal curvature of the spine being one of the main problems she faced. She came from a family that was completely involved in wrestling, so she didn't let this medical condition stop her from living her dream. Although she was able to hold the NXT Women's and Divas title at the same time and become the youngest Divas champion, she would suffer an injury. Once back, she led the stable of Absolution, and it looked like her career was going back on track. This did not last, and in a house show match with Sasha Banks, Paige suffered an injury after a kick. Given all her previous injuries, this was one that was a bit more serious. The saddest of all the wrestlers in this list, there is no one who can take anything away from what Owen Hart had already achieved in the field of wrestling. He may have been less famous than his brother Brett, but it was only by a little bit. He was one of the best technicians in the ring, and his time with the Hart Foundation saw him achieve almost every possible honor in wrestling. His match with his brother Brett remains one of the best matches of all time and set the bar in wrestling. Unfortunately, he just never seemed to be able to get out of his older brother's shadow. He passed away in 1999 in a tragic fall after a cable gave away, lowering him from the ceiling of the stadium during a show. Falling chest first onto the turnbuckle, the footage of that part of the show was never aired, with Jim Ross instead talking, which he barely was being able to restrain himself from tears. It is sad to think what Owen might have achieved if he had not died so tragically. And these are 10 superstars who never reached their full potential. I hope you're all having an amazing day. Thank you so much for watching Wrestling Hub, and I'll see you later with more wrestling videos.